Ready? Guess so. Good evening. Welcome to the budget workshop for October 27, 2016 for our capital budget and review of scheduling. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Township Manager Michael Lefevre.
Thank you, President Luker. We're scheduled to meet tonight on the capital budget. But prior to addressing the capital budget, after our budget work session last week, a couple commissioners had questions and asked for additional information regarding the proposed sewer rate increase. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Mr. Wrigley to come forward, maybe provide a little additional information and address any questions you might have.
Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me? Just to follow up with what Commissioner Lefevre said last meeting, if you look in your book under the wastewater, there's a table in there that we use for billing purposes. Director Barron and I come December, January, once a year, we take meter information from Aqua that we have to purchase from Aqua for all the different meter sizes, and that table in the book, it's called Sewer Operating Fund Budgeted Rates. I think it's page 3. Shows you meter sizes from 5/8 inch.
248.
I don't have a page number on those.
Page 248 in your book.
It's a large table. On the left side, it's the meter size. Starts with 5/8. It goes 3/4 inch, 1 inch, inch and a half, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8. If you look all the way out to the right end of that table, 2017 rate, every property that has a water meter gets billed a fixed fee depending on the size of their meter and a fee based on how many gallons of water they use, and the fee is so many dollars per 1,000 gallons. So for a typical median use, which is generally residential, it's about 58,400 gallons per year that a residence may use, and it's typically 5/8 meters for those residents, so they would pay $80 as a fixed fee plus $4.01 per 1,000 gallons. The increase based on that average is the $12 that we're talking about. And that's just for residential. I mean, I didn't do it for all the other rates, but residential is generally where most of the properties are, what most of us are involved in. I did a little statistical analysis because the only information I have is meter size and what the gallons is. That's all Aqua gives us. So I broke it down based on how many properties we have for each size meter. Most of the meters are 5/8 inch, and that accounts for about 93% of the properties. And you can't say that all those properties are residential because there's some small stores and retail in there, but generally over 17,000 out of 18,500 of the properties are 5/8 meters. So they're going to be responsible for about 45% of the increase in funds that we have to generate with this increase. The next size group who's going to pay the next largest amount, which is 26%, is the very largest meter, which is 6 inch, and there's only 7 properties. Now, 6-inch meters are very, very large meters, and they're used for the large industrial, and commercial, and institutional buildings. So, just to give you an idea, the other properties are mostly commercial properties. So a little bit less than half of the increase in dollars come from smaller meters, which are generally more residential. The other half is coming from, a little bit more than half, close to 55% would be the larger meters, which are generally commercial, multi-residential buildings, multi-strip malls that might have one meter that serves several different businesses. And it's all based on water. I mean, everything that we bill on and everything we generate revenue-wise is all how many gallons does a property use in a year. So if you go to, I guess it's the first page I don't know, I don't have a page number here. Maybe I do. There's a spreadsheet that Director Barron prepared. It's after the graph of sewer revenues.
244.
I don't have any page numbers on this, but it's very small print. It shows actual across the top for the revenue source from 2007 on the far right corner to 2017 estimated, 2016 projected. In the middle of that page, it shows sewer rents current. And it goes back to 2011, which is where we had the last rate increase. If you look at the numbers going from 2011 to 2016 projected, there's a general decrease in revenues, almost year after year after year. So from 2011 to 2012, it was 1.8% reduction. 2014 was 4% less. 2015, 1.6% less. And for 2016, the year we're in now, it's about 2.5% less revenue that we're getting. So it's been a constant, I wouldn't say constant, but nearly continuous downward trend of water use being less and less in the township, resulting in less and less revenues. I think we finally reached the point with the 2017 budget where the revenues have gotten to the lower point and the expenses have increased for wages, salaries. Mostly that's the biggest part of it. And 2016, there's a deficit right now in 2016. We knew that when we were billing back in February. So 2016, it's about $300,000 in that range deficit. We knew that coming into it. And throughout this year, I've been trying to cut expenses so I don't have that much more of a deficit. But that deficit will continue and enlarge if we go into 2017 because of the increase in expenses and the decrease in the revenues that we're getting. It's a compound situation between both items. The expenses, we have been able to reduce about a little more than 10% over the 3 years that I've been here. Now, these are the expenses that I can control directly. I can't control the wages, but things, electricity, parts, hiring contractors, outside work, all the things that I have control of, it's been about a little bit more than 10% decrease since I've been here. So it's not just increasing rates and increasing expenses. I've actually cut the budget each of the last 3 years. This budget this year is probably the tightest budget that I can cut across right now. And I needed it because the revenues are down. So it turned out to work pretty well over the last 3 years. But as of the third year going into 2017, we're going to need some kind of an increase to cover the expenses that we see.
Questions? Commissioner Klein.
At what point, so I mean, I realize that we're seeing a reduction in water usage. I know there's some large major players, plus I think people are more conscious, so you might see a continuing trend. Do you have an idea of at what point you can reduce, reduce your expenses to the point where we would offset, or at what point, how much less water that you treat do you treat to the point where you can actually reduce a larger portion of expenses and not just
Most of it is fixed. Most of the expenses are fixed. The effect of reduced, about 40% of the flows generated in township come to our own treatment plant. And that's what I have direct control over. The other 60% all goes to Philadelphia.
Right.
So we don't really have any control over Philadelphia whatsoever. They say this is the rate. We just had a rate increase. Their year goes from July 1st to June 30th. So July 1st is the third quarter. We had a pretty significant increase right now in 2016, and that's going to continue for the next 2 years.
But I would imagine that,
But-
you would have to have a colossal change in usage of water to the point where you could reduce, let's say, staff or anything at the wastewater treatment plant, because it doesn't matter whether you have, an insignificant amount of change in water usage. That still affects rates, but you still have to have the same amount of manpower to treat
You
whatever
have
it
to-
is, or to run the plant, I should
You
say.
have to be ready for I&I, basically. If you get high flows, the plant has to be there to make sure that the plant can handle that. What's flowing through the pipes doesn't really add or subtract too much from labor costs, what you need to put into it, because it's just water pumping through pipes.
Right.
Whether it's pumping 100 gallons a minute or 200 gallons a minute, it's still the same kind of, the bigger equipment you have generally is more expensive, but for the most part, changing equipment doesn't really change the cost that much.
Okay.
The only thing that affects us with our treatment plant is the surrounding municipalities are connected into our system, and we send bills to neighboring townships and ask for reimbursement. So as our costs decrease, we have less to ask of them to come back, so that kind of reduces our revenues also.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of a good point, but it hurts our revenues.
So this was 6 years coming, I guess, is what it really comes down to. It's been,
Looking back over it, before I came, I went back and looked over the statistics, and I think what's kind of generally happens is when properties are renovated, people buy homes, there's been a lot of commercial renovation, a lot of rehab of properties. If you go out and replace all your fixtures in your house or your property, it's all water saving. Everything's, you can't get anything other than water saving fixtures.
so do you guys have an idea that this rate increase would cover us for the next
3 years.
3 to...
Generally, I figure it's about 3 years plus, hopefully more. But generally, my estimate's about 3 years plus, hopefully 4 or 5 years.
And that's calculating in a reduction in water usage.
It's kind of
Some reduction in
It's a
water
guess.
Yeah.
Nobody knows for sure. It's a guess.
No, I understand.
I mean, there's actually more properties that are more active. They're not vacant properties, so you're getting a little bit more growth that way. But I mean, it's hard to say without actually surveying and talking to people. But there are some apartments that I looked at, and as people leave the apartment, they renovate the apartment, and they purposely put in low-flow fixtures. And they see it in their water bills. They save water-wise, and they save sewer-wise. So people are smart. They know if they cut back on their water use, they're saving money with Aqua, and they're saving the sewer also.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from commissioners? No? Any from staff? Any from the audience? Okay, thank you, George.
Okay.
Michael?
Thank you, President Luker, and thank you, George. I appreciate it. Looking at the Permanent Improvement Fund at our first slide, at the present time, we have approximately $4.6 million balance in that fund. Projected to spend a little less than $1.7 million out of the fund through the remainder of this year. But we have normal revenue of $94,000 scheduled to come in, along with a $1.2 million transfer from the 2015 surplus. The net result is we're going to have a balance of over $4.2 million in the fund at the end of the year, which is actually more than we had 2 years ago when we started this process at the end of 2014. It's working much better than we expected. Initially, we were a little hesitant if it would be self-sustaining with the revenue coming over from year-end surplus, taking a portion of year-end surplus and directing it to the Permanent Improvement Fund. But in the short term, it's worked out very well. So right now, at the end of the year, we're projecting a $4.2 million balance. Looking at the next slide, comparing 2016 with what we're projecting next year, you see a big, and these are the different sources of revenue for the capital fund. We're projecting $836,700 come from the Permanent Improvement Fund. That's a little higher than normal. Usually we're in the range of $600,000 to $700,000. That's basically attributable to one item, and that's the initial funding for matching funds for future grants of $250,000. I'll address that a little further in the presentation. But we have the $85,000 portion of the fire tax coming in, our fee and lieu money of over $500,000, and reallocated projects of $86,000. So the revenue source of $1.5 million, and our expenditures are the same amount. And we show a short-term trend of 15, 16, and 17, and how that money has been allocated. You see some jumps in a couple of the budgets. Again, the administration, a pretty big jump, but most of that's attributable to $250,000 being directed to the grant match.
Michael, do you expect that to be a yearly expense?
No, I don't. I think that's at least cover the first couple of years, and we have some other potential revenue coming in that may also be directed for the same purpose. So no, initially, we suggested $200,000. We thought if we go to $250 this year, that should cover us for a couple of years. Now, you notice the bond. I didn't include anything with the bond issue because there's been no commitment on the bond issue. But absent the bond issue, projected capital funding of $1.5 million. Looking at the bond issue, if we move ahead with the funding, out of the general fund, there's a proposed $3 million allocation for stormwater improvements, a $1.2 million match to the Old York Susquehanna Road project, $662,000 match for the Corps Engineer Sandy Run project, and some funding to cover the cost of financing of $5 million. In addition to that, the refuse fund is proposing a $1.5 million financing to cover the cost of 6 to 7 vehicles, collection vehicles. The cost of the funding is being proposed as a wraparound existing debt. So the only thing we actually be funding for the first couple of years is just the interest cost, $55,779 coming from general fund, and $15,786 coming from the refuse fund. This is I guess for anyone watching at home, it's a difficult slide to look at. But the only thing I want to show here is our actual debt service is very, very modest, both in scope and term. Even with this new bond issue, if we're to move forward, our debt service will be paid off in approximately 7 years. It will be paid off by the end of 2022 for both the general fund and also the refuse fund. So it's a modest amount of debt, and again, it's relatively short term, and it will remain relatively level throughout those 7 years for both funds. Now, looking at actual departments, I'll give you a brief breakdown on where the money is proposed to be allocated. You see for the Township Building, each year we do allocate about $50,000 for repairs to this building due to its age. There's a new item of $25,000 to replace the camera system. That's the exterior camera system at this building. It's very outdated, it's poor quality at this point, and it only covers sporadic portions of the exterior building, so we're looking to upgrade that. The other improvement would be to address the water damage and the water problem we have in the basement of this building. It periodically floods throughout the year, there's issues with mold, there's issues with the records we're trying to maintain down there. So we look to install French drain throughout the entire perimeter, drywall the basement, get a dry facility so we can manage those records down there. And the last one would be the $250,000 allocation for grant match. I'm going to alternate with Kevin on some of these so he can jump in here.
So the next department would be the information technology. So we're asking to put $25,000 away for finance update, and that's for finance software. Our software package is over 16 years old. It's time to start looking at new software package, so we put a little bit away the last couple of years. The next item is network server. Our servers were bought in June of 2010. So they're pretty old and sufficient. Usually a server will last about 5 years. It also includes a backup system. I think the description's on there pretty good. Life expectancy is usually 5 years for a server. So Nathan has put in there for that. And then the other thing is a large scanner replacement. Our scanner was purchased about 9 years ago. And we have people down there scanning a lot of the documents to get them digitized. And so if that scanner dies on us, we have nothing to do. So that's 3 of the objects they'd like to put in for this year.
Moving on to economic development, the proposed expenditures for 17 mirror identically with 2016, with $75,000 for our business maintenance program, $5,000 for each of the business districts, and $15,000 upgrading the decorative street poles.
Next would be the police, putting $25,000 for the in-car video replacement, just to keep that up and running, keep it up to speed, and any upgrades that need to be done. $15,000 for the police vehicle digital system, $10,000 for body cameras, $11,000 for the TASER program update, $21,500 for tactical equipment, patrol, rapid response, and $10,000 for prison holding facility repairs that need to be done.
Moving on to engineering. For the bond issue, if the board decides to move forward in stormwater improvements, the listing here is different than the one that was included initially in the budget. We asked Mr. Powers and Mr. Clark to revisit their priorities and operate on the assumption this would be the last bond issue we were doing for stormwater. So what are the most important problems they want to address out there? And this is the list they proposed. So as we move forward, considering the possibility of a bond issue, these are some of the projects we'd like to address. What we did include in funding under engineering are our MS4 obligation of $155,000, which is comparable to what we had funded this current year.
Next department was Public Works. We put in $200,000 for overlay. Now that is to...
Can I ask a question on that?
Absolutely.
Ed, I see on the budget, you have 200,000 here, and then it goes up to 350 for 2018, 19, and 20. Is that-
In most years, we put 300 to 350
That's what I was
in the
wondering.
overlay.
Right.
Because of the Aqua and Pico money, we're trying to use that up first. So this is money that Mr. Micolo and Mr. Pontondolfo asked us to put in to help with the milling of the roads, and then the paving would be done by the Aqua Pico money.
Okay, that explains that.
So that's why the later years have the higher money up there.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
If I could just acknowledge the efforts of Ed and Angelo, this year the Public Works Department paved approximately 18 miles of roads in Abington. It's a record. It was nonstop from spring right up to leaf season. It's absolutely amazing. And I think next year, Ed, if I'm not mistaken, they're projecting to do at least 14 miles.
Actually, this past year, Angelo and his crew, working with Pico, most of Pico money, along with Aqua money, I'm sorry. Township overlay program was 2.4 miles, and Aqua paving was 17.4 miles. So we did 19.8 miles of overlay this past year. Angelo's continue working with Aqua and Pico for next year. Looks like, as of right now, we will have 14 miles of Aqua work and 4 miles of Pico work, which we'll do about 18 miles. That's as we sit right now. There could be more added as we go on. We went through the list and compared the list up to what we had on our capital list, 5-year or 10-year overlay program, and almost half of the roads that they're going to be working on this upcoming year are on our 10-year capital program that we had anticipate doing in the next anywhere from 1 to 5 or 6 years from now. So we're actually not only some of the streets that don't need it, a lot of streets that we already have on our capital program that we anticipated doing in the near future, they're going to be, it'll be done, but using Aqua money.
Okay. So that 200,000 doesn't mean it's going to be...
200,000 will assist us in getting through all the work that we have to do, because what we'll do is we'll subcontract some of our, just the milling part of it.
Right.
While we're continually working, overlaying and milling, we will have another area being done by a separate contractor. So all we have to do is go back in there and just overlay it and continue working our way through.
It's amazing how you guys have this worked out.
Great.
I'm referring to page 339 under Public Works. All right, thank you, Ed. All right, I'm sorry, Kevin.
Oh, that's fine.
I saw a glaring difference in the numbers there.
Them numbers I put in there just to show the difference that
Right.
what would normally be used, so.
Thanks, Ed.
A couple other things in the Public Works, a new tire machine, rehab the milling and paving equipment. You know, with all this paving and overlay being done, the machines need to be done and worked on to keep up the work. New leaf machine and a closed trailer for parks. a John Deere Gator for Briarbush, and a Paladine Preparatory Rockhound for Parks also.
Moving on to the fire department, the $85,000 is the portion of the fire tax that's allocated to capital. We're showing here for radio replacement. Part of it may be allocated to the burn building repairs and a part of it to the radio, but we're showing it all to radio at this point. And this has been the same allocation for at least 4 or 5 years, I would think.
Michael, has there been any purchase of radios? Because I know there was that article about the problems with the Motorola radios.
There's a freeze on purchasing. I don't believe we've received any. I looked to, Mike Webb was here. No, we haven't received any at this point. So it is on freeze until they address the problem. We're shutting off.
We're putting the money away, but we're not purchasing until they clear up the problem.
And we do have money already, a significant amount of money put away in the police budget. We're trying to put some weight on the fire budget as well.
Okay.
The next department is library. One of the big items they needed was to replace the air conditioning system down in there, so we put $100,000 in there to replace the air conditioning.
And the last department on the general fund is the parks. We addressed the top requests from the Parks Department. The one we jumped over, the small pavilion, I believe they're addressing it in-house with some funds they had from unspent capital funds prior, providing $23,000 to Briarbush to address most of their needs. And then we jumped down to replace some equipment in Alvethorpe Park and addressing the goose problem we have in Alvethorpe as well, basically due to resident complaints.
Michael, I have a question. Doug, is there any money allocated or are there any plans of doing any work on Everthorpe Manor this year?
Right now, we had, a number of years ago, we received a request from the Schaefer estate.
Right.
And so we recently were waiting to finish. Ed still has a couple of things to do with windows. There's only a few
Right.
windows left to do. And then we're currently, and Ed is doing all the work on getting people together for the heater repair, because our heating system is, the basic heater system was put in 1939 when the building was constructed, but we have replaced the boiler over the years, so all that's getting pretty old, and Ed is looking into getting different sets of equipment to do that. So right now, it's the heater is the next main thing.
That's what I was going to ask, because we seem to be just pushing that further down the road, and I know it was a very costly project, and I know Ed was working on doing a lot of it in-house. So have we reached the point where that heater's going to have to be replaced right now, or is it still got some mileage we can get out of it?
Has a little bit of mileage.
Okay.
But Ed's, I think, is getting close. He came over the other day. I don't know if everyone can mention that, but he had some guys there that thought that they could put in a kind of split system like we use now. I don't see it in here, but we use a split system right now because the ductwork and everything else is so difficult to work with.
Right.
That we have an individual air conditioning unit now, but it could be heating or air conditioning, I guess. So.
Yeah, we should, if everything works out, I should have a bid spec together within 2 months. And 2 months after that, we should be up and running with, we should be able to start the work on replacing everything inside there, the air conditioning units, consolidating them. There's air conditioning units everywhere in that place. So we're going to consolidate everything, basically larger units, be able to handle the entire building. We've broken it into 3 sections, so it should be fairly easy to take care of everything. We're also looking at putting a small boiler in just to compensate, to assist with when we get to degrees that are below 10 degrees, so that we'll be able to compensate for the cold that's outside, and be able to keep it at a steady temperature. And currently, one of the biggest problems we're having over there right now is there's no controls over individual rooms. That will be taken care of. So each individual room will have its own thermostat.
So from a financial standpoint, what are we going to wait till these things happen and then make budget
I
adjustments?
should have enough funds that we have in reserve right now to cover all of our costs.
That's it. That's all. That's what I was looking
Just
for.
just to touch base on that, that money that was given by Mr. Schaefer was put in a separate fund called Parks Capital. and it was tagged, it had to be used for parks over at Everthorpe Park.
Okay.
So that money is not part of this normal capital project. It's money set aside, I think it's 134, 143, I gave Ed the number the other day, that has an expense line item, like a general materials and purposes, to spend that $130,000. So that'll be done, used at Everthorpe and Everthorpe only.
Yeah, I hadn't heard anything. Doug, it might be good to give updates on that when we do our, periodically during the year, what's happening with Everthorpe Manor, because I kind of lost sight of it, because we talked about it in depth about a year ago, and then I didn't hear any more about it. So I know you were working on it, but we didn't discuss anything, at least publicly, that I know of. Right.
Yeah,
And I know-
our biggest thing was trying to work with the people that were inside the building.
Right.
So that we could work in areas that they weren't working in or using, so we get all the windows replaced. So almost every window in the entire building has been replaced with new thermal windows. We only have a problem with one little section there, and it's a difference of opinion as to what windows to put in there. So we're working on that part. We'll get that resolved eventually. And once we get that resolved, we'll finish up putting the rest of those windows in there. And then what we have left is the heating system and a few doors.
Yeah,
And after that's done, that building should be where it's supposed to be.
Well, I think more recognition should be given the fact that all this work is being done in-house and the money that we're saving by doing it.
Which is why we were able to get it within the money that we were allotted.
Right.
I think the original estimates were somewhere close to $1 million to be able
That's what I
to
thought, right.
do what we are currently doing right now.
$20,000 was the estimate just to do the work up for the specs of the windows. So
Right.
We ended up not having to spend that since Craig and his crew went in and did all that for building maintenance.
And it's going unnoticed, and we don't talk about it, so I think we should, periodically let people know that that's what we're accomplishing in-house, so. All right, thank you.
Okay.
I got a question.
Yes, Dennis.
Doug, I see in here you have a line item for paving sections of RZ Roslyn walking path. Now, I know you weren't granted that money. So is there money set aside? Because some of those areas are eroding and washing away.
No, not really. I mean, it's all capital, so we've been working over the years with Angelo so that when he has any blacktop left over, if we can get something done in those areas, we will. I mean, as you remember, the residents, the residents at the time when we built that were very adamant about having a stone-type base. And just some of the slopes coming out of the park are very steep.
Working out good.
And we've tried, too, that we've tried a dozen different things with Tim from engineering and Ed to keep it stable, but nothing's working. So it really is, the answer is to have it, to pave it blacktop. Okay. So if, we keep it in there and we keep it, when the opportunity arrives, then we can hopefully, take that stone out, put some more blacktop in, and we really don't have to do the entire path. We only have to do those sections that wash out down along like Maple Avenue and I guess coming out of the parking lot on the other side.
Meyer Avenue, too. Yeah. Okay, thanks,
We're
Doug.
keeping an eye on that.
I know, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, go ahead, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay, the next part capital is the refuse department, which comes out of refuse fund. They're asking for a yard rear loader, trash truck, and to purchase one new fully automated side loader.
And lastly is our wastewater fund. There's two separate accounts. There's the plant operations account, which is basically replacing old equipment, hopefully doing our increasing operation and maintenance costs continue to go up due to repairs to some of this equipment. So we hope to replace the items listed here. Projected cost of $470,000. That's out of an existing balance in that account of $1.9 million. And the other account is our collection system account. And you see the proposed repairs there, the major one being the Old Welsh Road Phase 2 sewer system extension for $550,000, for a total expenditure a little over $1.1 million out of a $3.6 million fund balance.
The Old Welsh Road Phase 2, is that to supplement what we think the cost would be to do that second phase?
To supplement the cost?
Yeah, because we're doing the Phase 1, which is the south side of Old Welsh Road.
That's correct. I'll ask Mr. Ridley if you could address that.
Yeah, the number was what was the balance of what the original bids were
Right.
minus what the current phase is. So the original bid came in at 1.6, I think it was, 1.7, and the 980, 990 that's there now, the difference was about 500, and I just raised it to 550 just around it to cover that cost that might be going through the golf course, you know, that area.
Okay, so this is for the side, this is for the north side of Elden Welsh, right?
Yes.
To pick up the golf?
Yeah.
To pick up
I used the
house.
previous bid kind of as a beginning point.
Gotcha.
And just add a little more to it.
Thank you.
At this point, we'd happy to take any questions the board may have.
Okay, are there any questions from commissioners? Any from, yes, Tom?
So, question to both of you guys, Michael and Kevin. Absent going out to bond, I mean, what is the timetable and/or likelihood of accomplishing the projects that are listed there in the near term through regular means? I mean, I assume the probability is very low.
It would be low. We could factor in, depending on the continued growth of the permanent improvement fund, we would do a small amount of projects each year, but it would take forever to address
I mean,
the
that's
$3
a
million listing.
That's a 10-year list plus, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
Vice President Klein?
The network server, I know there's been some municipalities that have looked into cloud-based servers. Are we going to look into that as an option? Have we broached that subject?
That's probably something we look into more for the next upgrade.
Why?
We've done some stuff on cloud, but a lot of the applications we use aren't really ready to move to the cloud, like the Eden we use for finance, CityView we use for all our permitting. Especially a lot of the police software is all done in-house. We do our email on the cloud now, so we're gradually getting there, but we still need servers in-house.
Okay. And then the body cameras, is this the first time we put money away? I thought, did we put money away in the past?
I believe we have.
Correct. We have put money away a couple times already.
And have we purchased any?
Yes, we have.
Okay. And how many are those being used at this time?
I'll call Lieutenant Webb to have the exact answer.
Limited number at this point. We're still in evaluation mode, waiting for some changes in the legislation.
Okay, thank you.
Lieutenant Webb, what does a budget amount of, what is it, 10,000? What does that normally, how many cameras does that procure, roughly?
Approximately 5 cameras.
About 5? Okay. Thank you.
As the board's aware, with the body cameras, the issue isn't necessarily the cost of the cameras, it's the cost of managing the data, the equipment you'll need to acquire, and possible personnel costs as well.
Okay, are there any other questions from commissioners? Any from staff? And any from audience? If not, does that conclude your presentation?
It does.
Madam?
I mean, in the interim, we're scheduled to present the preliminary budget at our November 10th meeting, but in the interim, we'll certainly entertain any suggestions, input from the commissioners and the public as well.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you for attending.
Thank you.